What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I'm a musician and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead, or the week that we're already in. Thank you so very much for being here another time. Thank you for waiting on this. Thank you for sending this to a friend, watching it all the way to the end. Thank you for going to zambonifong.com, where you can get a 10-minute astrology reading like this one, where you can get an hour-long Zoom meeting with me, where we can talk about whatever's going on with you. We can talk about thank you for going to zambonifong.com/store, where you can get, that's where the 10-minute reading is. That's where there's merch available. There's beautiful artwork that also represents the music. Thank you for going to Spotify, Tidal, Pandora, Apple Music, wherever you like to get your music at, and finding Zamboni Funk music on there. I'm very proud of that work, and I think that it's really great, and I would love it if you would listen to it. Yeah, you can. There's so many different things. There's so many different avenues. I have a Patreon where you can get an electional report, where we can talk about how to maximize or optimize the timing of your life and all of the rest of the things. Thank you for checking all that out. Let's talk about the astrology of this week. So this week here we've got, so this forecast is showing up late here, right? And it's because there's too many things going on. There's too many things on my plate, and I feel like this is very strongly representative of the double retrograde thing that we've got going on here. And it's not only Mercury and Venus who are retrograde, but those are sort of like the most outstanding of the retrogrades that are taking place here. So we've been in Venus retrograde for a long time. This is not news at this point, right? In fact, this is the last week of Venus retrograde. Venus is going to station direct on Sunday, on the Sunday coming. So I'll talk about Venus moving forward pretty soon. But for this week, we've still got Venus moving backwards. We've still got Venus under that square from Jupiter. Now, that originally, some weeks ago, I was like, I think this looks pretty good, and that square to Jupiter looks like it really wants to help. What I have actually found is that Jupiter being ruled by a Venus who was retrograde and who was going through all the things under the beams of the sun and all this kind of stuff, right? That has been difficult for Jupiter. It has made it difficult for Jupiter to bring some of that positivity and wisdom and that hopefulness, that sense that like everything can work out or everything is going to be okay. All of that has been less potent than I originally thought that it was going to be. Now, I still have hopes. Still have good hopes for Venus once Venus moves direct again, and Jupiter will be able to help. And then basically anytime the moon is in a fixed sign, then the moon is going to be making aspect to two benefics at the same time. I think that looks like a pretty cute situation. We've got that for a few weeks going on. But for right now, for this week that we're still in, then we are still looking at Venus retrograde, still feeling all of the weird Venus retrograde feelings. Things are not working properly. The Venus things are not happening in the way that you might hope that they would. The connections, the harmony, the sweet things, the finding things that make it delicious to live in the world, and all of this kind of stuff, like the arts and the beauty and the music and all of this stuff, like feels a little weird, right? So all of that stuff continues this week, although we are maybe coming to a point of stopping that reevaluation and coming to a point of being like, okay, now what are we going to actually do about it? Now, the complicating factor here is that Mercury is also retrograde. Mercury is retrograde in Virgo. Now, this Mercury retrograde in Virgo is going to be kind of a superstar this week. We get a lot of Mercury retrograde energy, not only because Mercury is retrograde in Virgo, in a sign where Mercury is very powerful. That's also where the sun is. And so, and the sun is ruling Venus in Leo. And so there's more of that going on there. But also because we've got the full moon this week. This full moon is going to be in Pisces, opposite to the sun in Virgo. And it's going to be opposite as well to Mercury retrograde in Virgo. It's also going to be conjunct Saturn fairly closely. So, and even though that there's like a little sextile to Jupiter, and Jupiter rules Pisces, right? So Jupiter is going to rule that full moon in Pisces, and so that looks kind of cute. And Jupiter's making this square to Venus, which is ultimately a square to a benefic. But even still, that looks like a little bit a sextile is just like not as helpful as you want it to be when the moon is conjunct Saturn and opposite to Mercury retrograde. There looks like, so both Mercury retrograde and Saturn are associated with delays, right? With things going slower than you thought they were going to go. This is a really good time to give yourself some grace, especially if you're going to be traveling or something like that. Like I, for example, am going to be traveling pretty soon. There's a plant cutting conference. You can still get tickets to that. I think that there are like 4 tickets left or something like this. So you can go check that, go like hang out around a campfire with me at the plant cutting conference in West Edmondson, New York, if you are so inclined to do that. So I'm going to be traveling, so if you're going to be traveling, or if you are going to be like trying to send some kind of important communication or crunch the numbers on something or something like this, then just giving yourself a little grace, a little bit of like extra room to breathe. I would not recommend doing any of that on an empty stomach when you might be hangry or any of this kind of thing. I made that mistake yesterday. I like let myself get too hungry and like everything, the whole world started to collapse on me. You don't need to do that. You just don't have to do that unless you are in some kind of like dire situation where you don't have food or something like this. But like if you do have access to food, then eat some. And also you might think about resting or giving yourself some extra time to do the things, because the moon in Pisces just by itself is famously like pretty emotional, right? And then we put that with Saturn. Moon with Saturn looks like a situation where it looks kind of gloomy, or like it feels like things are never going to work or something like that. Put that then opposite to Mercury retrograde, and not only does it feel gloomy and such, but also and frustrated in this kind of thing, but also there's all this like confusion or miscommunication or misunderstandings and this kind of thing, right? So even when you thought it was a simple situation, it turns out that it's not actually all that simple, and there's all this extra stuff that has to go on here. And maybe, one of the things that I said in the fall or the summertime forecast that I did with Pals and Cameron was that like the information looks really terrible at this time, right? It's like Mercury is not in good shape for all of the rest of the year and into next year. Every time Mercury is in dignity, then we've got a square or opposition to Saturn and Neptune. And so that looks like tremendously confusing. It looks like there's bad information, like things are not working, like things are not clicking into place in a comprehensible or intelligible way, right? And so coming back to Venus retrograde coming in, like starting to station or like trying to station direct at the very end of this week, right? So we're sort of like finishing up the reevaluation process and thinking about what we're going to do, how we're going to move forward on it, right? But Mercury continues to be deeply retrograde and ruling the ruler of Venus. So it doesn't look like, even though you've been through this whole Venus retrograde ordeal, it doesn't look like things get more clear at the end of that. And so this sort of gets into where we live in this point now where we've transitioned into the age of air and this kind of thing, right? So we're thinking about like the information age and how we're going to make information. We're sort of like inundated with all of the information all the time, right? And it's hard to, in the era of deep fakes and AI generated text and all the rest of it, it's difficult to know what is true or what's a foundational principle upon which to build the thing, whatever it is you're going to build, or the direction to head or this kind of thing. Like, it's difficult to know what is true. And so what it looks like for a little while here, especially while Mercury is going to be, every time Mercury's in dignity, then we've got this square in opposition to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, then it looks like a situation where you have to try stuff and just see what sticks, see what bounces back, see what falls off. It's not going to be immediately clear beforehand. So even though we've been through this whole thing around like values and like what our values actually are, it can be difficult to take that like gnosis that can come from that and then turn that into genuine action, right? And so this week we're deeply retrograde. We've got both of these retrogrades going on in a big way. Venus is like moving very slowly. Mercury is like kind of moving a little quickly, but moving backwards. And so like there's lots of confusion here. take your time. Take your time, give yourself some space. Don't forget to breathe about it. That's all I got time for here. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing y'all next time.